In 1986, a Soviet surface-to-air missile was fired at an American aircraft flying over enemy territory. The missile was fast, one of the fastest ever built. It never had a chance. The pilot, flying over 80,000 feet above sea level, traveling at more than 2,000 miles per hour, simply accelerated and disappeared. That aircraft was the SR-71 Blackbird. And for more than 30 years, no missile, no fighter jet, no radar system in the world could stop it. This is the full story of the most extraordinary aircraft ever built by human hands. Where it came from, how it flew, why it was retired, and why, even today, nothing has replaced it. Stay with me, because this story is unlike anything you've heard before.
Another world, sky.
To understand the SR-71, you have to go back to the late 1950s. The Cold War was at its most dangerous. The United States and the Soviet Union were locked in a silent, terrifying arms race. Both sides knew the other was building weapons, nuclear bombs, missiles, military bases, but neither side could see exactly what the other was doing. The Americans needed eyes behind the Iron Curtain. And in 1956, they found a solution, a spy plane called the U-2. The U-2 was a remarkable aircraft. It flew so high, above 70,000 feet, that the CIA believed Soviet radar couldn't track it. And for 4 years, it flew deep into Soviet territory, photographing missile sites, military installations, and nuclear facilities. The Soviets knew it was there. They just couldn't reach it. Until May 1st, 1960. On that morning, a U-2 piloted by Francis Gary Powers was shot down over Sverdlovsk, deep inside the Soviet Union. Powers survived the crash, was captured, and put on trial in Moscow. It was one of the most embarrassing moments in American intelligence history. President Eisenhower had to admit on the world stage that the United States had been spying on the Soviet Union for years. The U-2 program was finished, and the question became, what comes next? The answer was already being designed in secret, in a small, windowless building in Burbank, California, at a division of Lockheed Aircraft called the Skunk Works. The Skunk Works was not a normal engineering department. It was founded during World War II by a man named Clarence Kelly Johnson, one of the most gifted aircraft designers who ever lived. Johnson's philosophy was simple: small teams, brilliant people, no bureaucracy, and absolute secrecy. The Skunk Works had already produced the U-2. Now, Kelly Johnson was given a new challenge: build a reconnaissance aircraft that cannot be shot down. Not just harder to hit, impossible to hit. The requirements were staggering. The new aircraft had to fly at altitudes above 80,000 feet, higher than any operational aircraft in the world. It had to sustain speeds above Mach 3, 3 times the speed of sound, over 2,000 miles per hour. And it had to be able to evade any missile system currently in existence. What Johnson and his team produced was called the A-12, the direct ancestor of the SR-71. The engineering problems they faced were extraordinary. At Mach 3, the friction of air against an aircraft surface generates so much heat that aluminum, the standard material for aircraft construction, would simply melt. The engineers needed a different material. They chose titanium. Titanium is incredibly strong, incredibly light, and incredibly difficult to work with. At the time, the United States didn't have enough titanium of the quality required. So the CIA set up a series of front companies to purchase high-grade titanium from the one country that had it in abundance: the Soviet Union. The Soviets, unknowingly, helped build the very aircraft that would spy on them for decades. Before we continue our story, let's take a closer look at the aircraft that made all of this possible. The SR-71 Blackbird, built by Lockheed's Skunk Works. Its role: strategic reconnaissance. In service from 1964 to 1998. Top speed, 3,530 kilometers per hour. That's 2,193 miles per hour, more than 3 times the speed of sound. Service ceiling, 85,000 feet. That's roughly 26 kilometers above the Earth's surface, high enough to see the curvature of the planet with the naked eye. Range, 3,356 miles on a single mission. Power, 2 Pratt & Whitney J58 engines, each one capable of temperatures exceeding 3,200 degrees Fahrenheit at full afterburner. Maximum takeoff weight, 170,000 pounds. Built for speed, designed for secrecy, legendary by design. Now, let's get back to our story. Building the SR-71 was one of the greatest engineering achievements of the 20th century. Every single aspect of the aircraft had to be reinvented from scratch. Let's start with the fuel. At Mach 3, the aircraft's surface temperature reached over 600 degrees Fahrenheit. Standard aviation fuel would ignite. The engineers developed a special fuel, called JP7, that was so stable it couldn't be lit with a match. To start the engines, a separate chemical ignition system had to inject a compound called triethylborane, which ignites on contact with air. The engines themselves, 2 Pratt & Whitney J58S, were unlike anything ever built. They were designed to operate efficiently across an enormous range of speeds, from takeoff to over Mach 3. At high speeds, the engines functioned almost like ramjets, using the aircraft's own velocity to compress incoming air. Now consider the airframe. Because titanium expands under heat, the SR-71 was actually designed to leak on the ground. The panels didn't quite fit together at room temperature. They only sealed properly when the aircraft reached operating temperature at speed. Pilots who flew the early missions remember looking down and seeing fuel dripping through gaps in the fuselage before takeoff. The aircraft carried its fuel and then sealed itself shut as it flew. The cockpit was no less extreme. At 80,000 feet, the atmospheric pressure is so low that an unprotected human would lose consciousness in seconds. The pilots wore full-pressure suits, similar to a spacesuit, that would keep them alive if the cockpit ever depressurized. Looking out the windows of the SR-71, pilots could see the curvature of the Earth. They could see the black of space above them. They were not quite astronauts, but they were closer to space than virtually any other human being alive. And below them, they photographed everything. In a single hour of flight, the SR-71 could photograph 100,000 square miles of territory. Its cameras captured images with a resolution fine enough to read license plates from 80,000 feet. The SR-71 entered operational service with the United States Air Force in 1966. Over the next 24 years, it flew some of the most dangerous and consequential reconnaissance missions in the history of American intelligence: Vietnam, the Middle East, North Korea, Libya, the Soviet Union's borders. Every time an SR-71 flew into contested airspace, it triggered a response. Enemy radar locked on. Surface-to-air missiles were fired. Fighter jets scrambled to intercept. None of them ever caught it. The standard procedure when a missile was detected was not to evade. It was to accelerate. The SR-71 would push to full power and simply outrun whatever was chasing it. By the time a missile reached the SR-71's altitude, the aircraft was already miles away. Over its operational lifetime, more than 4,000 missiles were fired at SR-71S. Not one ever hit. The aircraft flew 17,300 operational sorties, individual missions, and never lost a single aircraft to enemy fire. 12 were lost to accidents during the program's lifetime, but none to hostile action. There are missions that remain classified to this day, but some have been declassified, and they read like something out of fiction. In 1973, during the Yom Kippur War, an SR-71 flew over the Middle East and provided the United States with real-time intelligence about the positions of Egyptian and Israeli forces, intelligence that directly influenced American diplomatic decisions during the crisis. In 1986, after the United States bombed Libya in retaliation for the La Belle discotheque bombing in Berlin, SR-71 71S flew post-strike reconnaissance missions over Tripoli within hours, bringing back damage assessment photographs before any other intelligence system could respond. And during the Cold War's most dangerous years, SR-71S flew along the edges of Soviet territory, just outside Soviet airspace, photographing military installations, submarine pins, missile sites, and troop movements that no satellite of the era could match for timing and resolution. The Soviet Union complained, officially and repeatedly, about these flights. There was nothing they could do to stop them. The SR-71 still holds the absolute speed record for a manned, air-breathing aircraft. On July 28, 1976, an SR-71 set the record, 2,193.2 miles per hour, Mach 3.3. That record has never been broken. On the same day, it set the absolute altitude record for level flight, 85,068 feet. That record has never been broken either. On September 1st, 1974, an SR-71 flew from New York to London in 1 hour, 54 minutes, and 56 seconds. The Concorde, the world's most famous supersonic passenger jet, took 3.5 hours to make the same trip. The SR-71 was not just faster than anything else in the sky. It was in a category entirely by itself. In 1989, the United States Air Force announced the retirement of the SR-71. The official reason was cost. Each flight cost approximately $200,000 per hour to operate. Maintaining the aircraft required enormous resources, specialized fuel, specialized facilities, highly trained crews. And satellites, the argument went, had become good enough to replace it. Not everyone agreed. Many intelligence officials argued, and continue to argue, that satellites cannot do what the SR-71 could do. A satellite follows a fixed orbit. An adversary can track that orbit and hide activities during overflight windows. An SR-71 could appear over any location on Earth, without warning, within hours. The Air Force brought the SR-71 back briefly in the mid-1990s, after it became clear that satellite coverage had real gaps. But it was retired again in 1998. Today, the SR-71 is in museums. The fastest manned, air-breathing aircraft ever built sits behind glass, visited by school children and veterans who flew it and remember what it felt like to see the curvature of the Earth from a cockpit. And the question that engineers and military analysts ask, quietly, is this: what replaced it? The official answer is satellites and unmanned drones. The classified answer, if there is one, has never been made public. There are persistent rumors, never confirmed, of a successor program. An aircraft sometimes called the Aurora, something that flies faster, higher, quieter than anything the public knows about. Maybe the SR-71 was truly one of a kind, a product of a specific moment in history. The Cold War, the space race, the era of Kelly Johnson and the Skunk Works, that cannot be recreated. What we know for certain is this: 50 years after it first flew, the SR-71 Blackbird remains the fastest, highest flying, most capable manned reconnaissance aircraft ever built. Nothing has surpassed it. Nothing, as far as we know, has even come close. If you made it this far, thank you. The SR-71 Blackbird is one of those rare stories where the truth is more extraordinary than anything fiction could invent. An aircraft that outran missiles, that photographed entire countries in an hour, that flew so high its pilots could see the stars in the middle of the day. On this channel, we'll keep telling stories like this one. The aircraft, the missions, the men, and the machines that changed history. Subscribe if you want more. We'll see you on the next flight. If you'd like to support this project, the link is in the description below.